So welcome back to The Defiant Spirit. I'm Baruch Halevi, also known as the creator of The Defiant Spirit and the Defy Your Number Enneagram system, and your guide to and through this podcast. So thanks for tuning in. For those of you first-time listeners, we talk about all things Enneagram, which is an ancient energetic personality map, sometimes called a personality assessment, 9 basic personality or energy types, together with the defiant power of the human spirit, a term that rose out of my teacher and mentor, Dr. Viktor Frankl, and his work, logotherapy. I'm a logotherapist. He is the father of logotherapy. And that is simply, or not so simply, meaning-centered, not only therapy, healing, but living, purpose-driven life. I think that was said by someone else, but nonetheless, that's what it is, and that's what I do. I help people discover meaning in all aspects of life and live their purpose in all aspects of their life. So we use the Enneagram as a roadmap to just give us practical tools and strategies of how to do that. Now, we've been marching through the Enneagram over the past few months, starting with 1, working our way up to almost, at least in the next couple of weeks, 9, so that you would have 9 basic videos or podcasts, however you're getting this, so that I could refer you to. I refer clients to these. People ask me all the time, what's the Enneagram? I do have a program. I have a very methodical, thorough program called Defy Your Number. And if you're watching on the video, you see a picture of Defiant Spirit, Defy Your Number Enneagram System. This is from Enneagram number 8. So I have 9 different packets or packages with an ebook and videos and workbook and step-by-step sort of multimedia experience. And even built into that is an Enneagram assessment, not just any old assessment, but the Enneagram assessment on the market. There's a lot of free ones out there. Ain't going to do you any harm to take it. It probably just isn't going to do you that much good either. At best, if it's correct, you don't know what to do with it. And at worst, it's going to misguide you, mistype you down a different path. Now, at the end of the day, only you can decide what your Enneagram number is and isn't. And this assessment that I use gives you a lot more in-depth analysis of your Enneagram type. But again, at the end of the day, it's up to you to discover it and to defy it, though I do make it very easy. Now, one-stop shop. Jump over to defiantspirit.org, take the assessment, get into the right program based on your Enneagram type, and this is just a taste of what you'll get over there. So Enneagram 8, for anybody, just first-time listeners, don't know much about the Enneagram, no problem. You're in a good, safe, sacred space to explore it. The numbers are always the same in every Enneagram system, meaning that, everything we're going to talk about is going to be true, or at least the majority of it's going to be true in most systems. The names change. So I go by the name the Challenger. There are other names. Let me jump to a slide here that I can never remember. The Boss, the Maverick, the Defender, the 8-hole. That's my wife's name for it, simply because I am an 8. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it, because in every Enneagram system, it really represents the same type of energy. And again, that's what this is. You're not an 8. I'm not an 8. I have energetic patterns like an 8. I react, as we'll be talking about, like an 8. I can respond like an 8, but I'm not an 8. And you're not a 2 or a 5 or a 7. It's our default strategy. Again, you have all 9 numbers within you. And the work of Defy Your Numbers to defy your reaction, to stop reacting, to take back the power to choose your response from the work of Viktor Frankl. This is all the power we have, to choose our response to any given set of circumstances. And so the work we do here is to understand our number, not to limit you or reduce you, but the opposite. To understand where we have been limited, where we have been reduced by ourselves, by our families, our friends, our society, where we have gotten stuck in a box. Or as Mitch, what's his name? No, it's not Mitch. Dan Millman, who wrote the book about Socrates, I just blanked on it. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior says something to the effect of, most people don't realize they're in a prison of invisible bars. Meaning we create our own prisons. We put ourselves behind these invisible bars and we just get stuck there. And we start living our lives in this repetition, in this rote reaction to whatever comes our way. And the work that we do here, the Defiant Spirit, the way that I understand and teach the Enneagram, Defy Your Number, is to stop reacting, to start responding, and to defy. So this is a page from the Defy Your Number program for Enneagram 8, the Challenger. And I have I have lots of fun pictures all throughout the 41 pages of each ebook. But this is taken from the Defy Your Number program. So this is just a good way to bring to life, I think, each Enneagram type, is to show famous examples. Now, it's not hard science. I've been asked a couple times, how do I know for sure? I don't know for sure. I simply know what I know about the Enneagram. I have intuition like you. I've looked at other people's, almost every other Enneagram program out there. So I'm drawing from best practice. There's no, however, universal agreed upon, that Winston Churchill is an 8. However, reacting like an 8 myself and knowing Churchill and having read, at least one of his biographies, I have confidence that he was an 8 because there's similar patterns and strategies that all 8s employ or deploy. We all have this within us, but some of us, this is what I call our core type, our core go-to strategy. So if you're listening, I'll just share with you some of the names on here and you'll start quickly to get a vibe for an 8. But Charles Barkley, if any of you know basketball, Barkley, all 8 rebounder. Johnny Cash, you can hear the 8-ness in his just really direct and raw music. Alan Dershowitz, he is definitely an 8 if you've ever seen him operate in the courtroom. Bruce Lee was supposedly an 8. Clint Eastwood movies are like all 8s, and Clint Eastwood probably is an 8. Toni Morrison, read her poetry and her writing. It just is raw and real like an 8. Queen Latifah, Russell Crowe, the musician Pink, Barbara Walters, Sean Penn, you can see a lot in his later in life advocacy, Denzel Washington, Frank Sinatra, Muhammad Ali. Sometimes I think he's a 3 when I watch his performance because he's a little more performative than 8s tend to be, but I haven't read anything formally about Ali. I've only watched a few documentaries or movies, and he just struck me as very justice-driven and anti-authoritarian type 8. So I guess that takes us into some of the core values of an 8. So 8s are unmistakable. Some types are going to be harder to distinguish what their particular vibe is, where they fit in. But some types are just so obvious. Like I can always tell with a 5, the investigator. I can always tell a 4, the individualist. I can always tell an 8. So 8s are the most intense type. Doesn't mean they're always intense because we can learn to defy our number. I was way more intense when I was in my teens, 20s, and into early 30s. I see it in my daughter, Maya, who's mini me, and she's an 8. And so a lot of fire. And I think a lot of it has to do with hormones. And once the hormones start settling, for me, the testosterone really kind of comes down into your 30s. And by the time you hit 40, think you look like a different type of 8, but not necessarily. Some 8s just never really stop reacting and keep living that way. So 8s are intense. They're bold. They're strong, powerful. You can't get an 8 to budge on something he or she doesn't want to budge upon. It's just not going to happen. You'll never overpower an 8. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go head to head with an 8. And sometimes that's the only way to deal with an 8 because they do respect that power, that strength back at them. It's a fine line, though, because it can also cause them to flip their lid, and then you got World War III going on. So sometimes it's about stepping up and putting an 8 in his place, and other times it's about not fighting fire with fire, but really backing off, letting cooler heads prevail, giving an 8 some space, and then she comes back and you can reason with her. But 8s are just intense. My whole life, I've been told I'm too much. I would say 8s and 4s, the individualists, are often told they're too much for different reasons. Which I would say 2, 8, and 4. 2 is the helper. 2s tend to be told they're too much. That's a lot of 2s tend to be told they're too much around relationship kind of issues, and that's hard to hear for any type, but it's hard for 2s to hear. 4s are told they're too much when it comes to emotion, sort of drama or that kind of piece of the equation. And 8s tend to be told they're too much. I gotta stop saying this. Around the way they do things. We do too much. We are the doers of the Enneagram. We are the movers and shakers. We make shit happen. Now the problem is we shouldn't always be making shit happen. We should not be making it happen. More often than not, if you're an 8, you're going to over, not underdo, and that can cause just as many problems as my neighbor, the 9, the peacemaker, who tends to underdo when they come up against the challenge. 8s will overdo it. Now, why are we overdoing it? I say this on every podcast. I'll say it again here. I love the Enneagram because it gets into the why we do what we do. Other tests deal with hows and whats and wheres and whens. The Enneagram does deal with that, but the most value it offers us is to understand the why. Why do I do what I do? And that is, for an 8, coming down from this place of autonomy and control. If you're looking, I'm going to combine these two. But autonomy, control, we don't want to be controlled. We value autonomy. When I was a rabbi and I had a congregational position and I hit a sort of ceiling of salary, they couldn't offer me any more. I didn't care. And I negotiated for time off, freedom. I had negotiated for freedom of pulpit. I had my contract. I could say whatever I wanted to. I answered to lots of rabbis will answer to ritual committees. And it's a big source of tension for a lot of rabbis and congregations, synagogues. I put in my contract, no, I am like Hebrew national hot dogs. Why? Because I answer to a higher authority. And I put in there specifically, I will not answer to a ritual committee. You're paying me to be the big boss on all things Jewish. So you're going to either have to trust me and hire me for that or not hire me. And so that was a very 8 thing to do. Now, it got me into some trouble. I didn't engage enough people in the process. I didn't get enough buy-in before I did some really crazy things that pushed the envelope too far. But that's just how 8s roll. And I'm a sexual 8, so that's a different subtype. It's the most intense. So not all 8s are this intense, but with all 8s, there's this need for autonomy and control. And if you try and control us, it's like sucking the oxygen out of our blood. I can't handle being handled. I hate it. I know it. 8s have a 6th sense for when people are trying to handle us and manage us and control us, and it drives us batshit crazy. Just telling you right now. Doesn't mean we don't have work to do. I have plenty of work to do. Ask my wife, Ariella, and I've done a lot of work, and I still have a lot of work to do around taking a deep breath, allowing myself to be managed, allowing myself to be controlled, allowing other people to have input into my life, my decisions, whatever. And so that's a growth process, but it doesn't come naturally for an 8. Now, why? Well, I'll finish up here with some core values and then I'll talk about why, where it's coming from, the fear. But, power, autonomy, control, freedom. And that comes from this drive. Nobody wants to just be autonomous and in charge for autonomy and in charge's sake. I mean, for what? To do what? To be in control. So now what? Justice, truth, some of these big, bold, important issues in life. It doesn't mean all eights are good. We have more than our share of representatives of the, tyrants and the dictators in human history. I would imagine a good percentage of them were Enneagram 8s, I'm thinking like Fidel Castro and Saddam Hussein. And I read a whole thing on this once about all the different tyrants. I think I blocked it out just for sanity purposes. So, so it doesn't mean that we're all good all the time, but there is this drive for absolute, a black and white, kind of a right and a wrong. And we can be skewed on our understanding of that, but we're driving towards that. We don't see the world well in shades of gray. That's not an eight thing. Eights are in or they're out. They're on or they're off. Truth or falsehood. Which is it? Now, life usually isn't that binary, that dichotomous. Usually it's shades of gray. When I was in high school, I remember my mom saying to me, son, life is not black and white. Life's shades of gray. And I now understand why she told me that, because I'm raising an 8 and everything is black or white, on or off, reactive or inactive. And it just doesn't work that way with most issues. I don't know of really that many issues that are black and white. However, there are times when truth and justice are on the line. And you look at the Winston Churchills, some other ones, some other big truth, justice, freedom fighters I have later on down here. Martin Luther King, Steve Jobs, Jackie Robinson. The list goes on. These are people who made big things happen. I mean, go back to Churchill. I really believe no Churchill, maybe no Baruch Halevi, because I think Churchill was in some ways one of the only things standing between Hitler crossing the Atlantic and, if you ever want to watch a terrifying TV show or read a book, Philip Roth, I blanked on the name of Philip Roth's book, but The Man in the High Castle is a show. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's what would have happened if there was no Churchill, or if somebody didn't shut down Nazism and they won and they made it to America, and what America would have looked like. Well, there are key people throughout history who changed the trajectory of the future. And I think Churchill was one of those. And I imagine if we were to look at lots of those figures, we'd probably find that more often than not, they're 8s. You think about it like a Napoleon or a Constantine, or I imagine they were 8s. So there's this truth and this justice. Not always batting 1,000, but always stepping up to the plate. That was a pretty good analogy. Okay, so where is this coming from? Why? Why does an 8 drive through life this way? This is page 2 in the ebook that you're going to get when you engage the Defy Your Number program. And there's this mantra in the back of an 8's head over and over and over. I am in control, right? I am strong. I am powerful. I am in control, or unstoppable. And it's just this mantra. Each type has this broken record in their head. 8s spend their entire lives telling themselves, be in control, be strong, protect, fight, defend. Why? Because I'm going to jump to another page. The core fear. Where do I have the core fears? Right here. The core fear of an 8 is weakness, vulnerability. I'm not going through all of these in the program. Of course, I go through all of them, but in this one, I'm just doing highlights. So the core fear of an 8 is to be weak, to be vulnerable. And so an 8 will overcompensate his or her entire life from the time she's a child till, now, trying to fend off the threats. So going head to head is a form of fear. Now that might strike some types as counterintuitive, because many types, fight or flight, they take flight. Well, 8s are one of the handful of types that go into fight when we are scared. That's one way you're really you have an 8 in a vulnerable place is because they look more intense. That probably means they're less in control. They're in reaction, and they're in reaction because they are um, they are in fear. Knowing that when you have an animal backed into a corner and its claws are out and teeth are bared, fangs are bared, it's probably the time to back off. And I would say that's when you know to back off with an 8. Now that's different than when I'm in my bravado mode, when I'm in my more tough talking mode. A lot of T's today. Tough talking mode, and I'm sort of shut down in a healthy way by somebody with more authority. I've had this multiple times with doctors or my lawyer or whomever I've entrusted, and they can, try speak directly to me and kind of shut it down from a place of authority. And it's not a combat. It's not a battle between us. It's more of them recognizing in me that I am wrong and I'm scared and I'm just in need of somebody to tell me what to do, and they have the authority and the actual facts on their side to do so. And so that's a very important understanding of an 8, that oftentimes they need that. But there's a difference between backing an 8 into the corner and them coming out fighting versus them pontificating and posturing and all the bravado stuff, and that's just not real. As I mentioned before, as you're looking at this, I'm not real proud of it, but war criminals, tyrants, bullies, Johnny Lawrence, for those of you in pop culture, Karate Kid, I think he was an 8, certainly his sensei, John Priest, I forgot his name, but Cobra Kai, definitely an 8-ish vibe. I love this slide. If you're not looking, you'll get it when you engage me in the Defy Your Number program. But these are all 8s in pop culture. You got all kinds of scary 8s on here. You got Darth Vader. You got Yosemite Sam. You have, again, John Priest or whatever his name is. You got Princess Leia. Sometimes people say she's I think a 6. I think she's an 8. Have you ever seen Fauda? If you haven't watched Fauda, Fauda's a great show about Israeli special forces or undercover, whatever, I forget what they are, Mossad maybe. But anyways, the lead character in it, he's an 8. Oftentimes you have these kind of 8 tough guys, tough gal images, and then you watch these shows, you get to see them, and underneath there's a soft, a vulnerable side to an 8, to your 8. And that's important to know, to come back to. So, I have it here. 8s are really overcompensating for being vulnerable. Now, if you are an 8, I would say that's a pathway back for you. It's called the virtue. And the pathway back to your true self as an 8 is to bring down the intensity, right? To bring down the need to be in control, in charge, to realize you've done your best. If you're an 8, we know you've done your best. You probably overdone it, and now it's no longer your best. And now you need to sit back. You need to let go. You need to let God. You need to be open to other people stepping in and helping. You need to open your palm, to be vulnerable, right? To stop clenching so hard and fighting your way through life. I'm making a fist for those listening, and to open your palm. Great midrash in the rabbinic tradition. Some of you have heard this before, but the Talmud says every baby is born into the world with fists clenched, and every corpse leaves with hand wide open, right? Unclenched, exposing their palm. The work of our lifetime is to learn how to unclench our fists before life unclenches them for us. And I would say this is the work of an 8, to release the grip, to open our palm, to expose that softer side of our hand. The knuckles are rough and tough, and you're ready to fight, but to expose the softer side of not only your hand, but yourself is the work of an 8. Ari Ellis says to me all the time, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You need to soften. I think this is a word I've heard from her and my mom and others 1,000 times. Soften, be softer, be gentler, be more compassionate. Drop your sword of truth and pick up this, sort of message of mercy and compassion. That's really hard for an 8 because, again, when we're scared, we go into fight. And it feels like a failure to us as eights when we aren't conscious of the fear that we're in. And so part of, here's a strategy, but part of the work I do now is before I hit send on that email that I composed after being screwed by the RV dealer that I'm now, in verbal battle with, before I hit send, I really try and force myself to meditate. Meditation for me has been part of my salvation. And if it's still true on the other side of that meditation, then I will hit send. More often than not, no email escapes after a meditation unedited. I mean, some of them may get deleted, but more often than not, it's just taking out 6 F-bombs and, 2 name callings and a partridge in a pear tree kind of thing. So I need time to ready, aim, fire. Not fire, 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 ready, 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 aim. Because it gets me and eights into a lot of trouble. So finding ways to cool off. Now, if you're in relationship with an 8, finding ways to walk away or to get them to walk away. I hear quite often people who are in relationship with 8s that they get mad when 8s just walk away. But more often than not, that's an 8's way, maybe not the healthiest way, of discharging some of this energy, going on a run or sitting in meditation or putting their hand through the wall. Not the healthiest way to deal with your anger, 8s, but I literally have been there and done that. And they're trying to redirect that energy. Now, the work we are all here to do is to stop reacting, to find better ways to discharge that energy, to harness it, and to use it. So giving 8 space, 8's taking space. And if you're not an 8, understand that this is a necessary step. When we're in it as 8s, it's like The Exorcist. I can't describe to you the level of anger that I feel at a bodily level. So 8, 9, and 1, the challenger, the peacemaker, and the reformer behind me, they are all body types. They're all anger types. 1s repress their anger. 9s go away from anger. 8s express their anger. So 8s are the most volatile and intense angry types when they're reactive. And it's like a possession. You're possessed. In fact, in the Talmud, it says that anger is a form of idolatry for this reason, because you're not in charge. You've outsourced your power to this emotion. From an Enneagram perspective, it's not an emotion; it's a bodily sensation, and so we're literally insane. So 8s, you have to understand this, that anger can overtake us and become almost like a drug. Now, it has a redemptive quality. People say, how the hell are you going to say this is good? Back to Martin Luther King. I get so tired of us turning dead people into saints. He was not a saint, if what you mean by that is perfect, right? In the sense of people want to make him, or I think Mother Teresa was an 8 too. I have her as a 2, but I think she was an 8 from what I've heard. There's an anger. Now, they learned how to harness the anger, and both of them did so much good around it. But listen to King's rhetoric. I mean, he was not a saint. He was not a gentle giant. He was an angry giant who harnessed his anger. Nonviolence from a man who was an 8, that's an act of heroism, who preached it and lived it. But there's a fire in his belly that, thank God, there was, because I think 8s who are responsive, who learn how to harness that, can do great things in this world with that energy of anger. So it's about learning how to harness it, to use it. One of my favorite teachings is by a rabbi mystic named the Koritzer Rebbe, who said, I conquered my anger a long time ago, and now I keep it in my pocket. That way it's there when I need it. And we need anger in our pocket. We need to be able to access it, to learn how to access it. 9s could, and 7s could really stand to, and 1s, and all of the types can stand to learn how to access their anger in a healthy way. 8s can teach us how to do that. The responsive 8 is a game changer. The responsive 8 is driven by this sort of sense of salvation, not theological or religious salvation, but to save the weak, the those who are being abused, those who are preyed upon. They're here to save by bringing justice to injustice or right to wrong. And so you really have to appreciate this energy of an 8. As a world, we should be grateful for 8s. And if an 8 is in your life, trust me, they're not the easiest people to deal with on the Enneagram, but they certainly, I'd like to think, are worth what they bring. It doesn't excuse their bad behavior. It explains it. Now the onus is on them to do the work, stop reacting, and start responding as the high side of an 8. I will see you in the next podcast or in the next video, or you'll hear from me in the next podcast. And until then, jump over to defiantspirit.org. It's almost ready to go. I mean, the new website is up there. It's pretty minimal, but we're adding a sales page for Defy Your Number. I have a new ebook that's free, complimentary, and not some, BS ebook like you oftentimes hear about. But although it's like 15 pages, they're packed full of all 9 types summaries, and I call it 9 Enneagram types walk into a bar, and just gives you kind of an overview of each Enneagram type. So that should be up on my website soon, and all you'll have to do is click a button. Until then, just shoot me an email at Baruch, Baruch, at defiantspirit.org, and you can shoot me an email. I'll get you the ebook, and that is my gift to you. So until the next conversation, defy your number and live your spirit.